What's going on, everyone? MikeO back with a new episode of Hobby Talk. Here to talk about the world of sports cards, have a little fun, have a little conversation with Andy, who is she blinded me with refractors. He's on YouTube, Instagram. Andy, welcome to the show.
Well, first off, thanks for having me, Mike. I've always enjoyed these shows. I just like to get on here and talk about the hobby. So let's do it, man.
Yeah, there's plenty to talk about in the hobby of sports card collecting. It's been a hobby that's obviously been around for generations, and it has found new life in the last 10 years or so, it seems, and more specifically, really in the last 4 or 5, and then even the last 3, 4 months. It just seems to continuously be kind of evolving, more people getting involved, people going crazy with it. And of course, social media is part of the reason. I know you're on YouTube and Instagram. Let everyone know about your channels and then a little bit about how you got started in this hobby that we both enjoy.
Yeah, so I started my YouTube channel, I would say probably about 2.5 years ago. And, I've been watching YouTube sports card videos for, man, I don't know, I'd say probably like a year before I really even thought about creating my own channel. One of the first channels that I ever watched was Elite Co 3, which is our friend Nolan. And I went down that rabbit hole, and then you start getting suggested videos. So I started watching your channel. I started watching Mike Baseball Collector. And at the time, I was actually pretty heavily into a 1994 finest football refractor set, and I was kind of interested in showing that off to people. So I wanted to come up with a clever name, and obviously, collecting those refractors, I wanted to have refractors in the name. So if you're familiar with the song "She Blinded Me with Science," I kind of combined the two and came up with "She Blinded Me with Refractors."
And I know many out there are a big fan of your channel name. I hear that very often. We're like, the best channel name. She blinded me with refractors.
It was honestly just kind of like something that just popped into my head one day whenever I heard that song, and I'm like, you know what, I collect refractors and they're kind of blinding, so let's just combine those two. And then I was kind of late to the game on Instagram. I think I've only been on Instagram for less than a year, but I've really enjoyed that as well. It's just another avenue to meet people that aren't on YouTube, and just kind of expand your friends that you make in this hobby.
Yeah, and social media has obviously become kind of an integral part of the hobby at this point. I mean, there's so much information to just kind of take in to learn about different aspects, different sets. I mean, this hobby is sports cards in some way have been manufactured for over 100 years. So just think about the amount of stuff out there, and then obviously the different time periods in the modern day market, the modern day hobby, just the different brands and the ever changing the amount of sets. I mean, there's endless information, and you're going to find people who are experts on all these different things. So information's big, but also, and it maybe has never been more important, but the friendships that you can grow here on this in this social media community of sports cards is it's pretty important. It's a great way to share the hobby because I mean, what's the hobby without having people to talk about it with, or learn from, or kind of get advice from? So that's definitely a big time thing that I'm sure you also enjoy.
Yeah, man, like I watch a ton of videos on YouTube, and with the amount of videos that I watch and the amount of content that's out there today, like I can honestly say that I learn something new virtually every day about this hobby. And I started collecting when I was 8 years old in 1987. I can still remember getting my first pack of 87 tops at a convenience store. That's how old I am. I can still remember when they sold packs in convenience stores back then. And regardless of how long you've been doing this, there's always so much that you can learn. So yeah, it's a great way to, like you said, meet friends, create those relationships with people, other fellow like-minded collectors, and yeah, it's really been great, Mike.
And it's always brought to another level when you get to meet, in person and stuff. And we've had the chance at the National Sports Collectors Convention. Sadly, this year looks unlikely to happen. Obviously, not going to happen when it was supposed to. But, that's where you really kind of get a sense of it. It seems like every year the National has been growing in size and scope as a show, but the interaction you get, and that's built and that's formed through relationships on social media. So that's sadly something that will, in all likelihood, miss out on this year. But it's, unless you kind of get involved in that. So for people who aren't really involved, maybe they watch or listen from afar, don't be shy, get involved because there's just so much and they become real life relationships. It's not just, a comment here and a comment there. It's, people that you can interact and talk about sports cards and other things, on a real level. So that's always awesome.
Yeah, without a doubt. I mean, like last year, the National was a totally different experience for me. Like, I think it was my eighth National that I've attended, but it was by far the best one in my opinion. And it was, all because of the friendships and people that I had met through YouTube. Just being able to meet everybody in person, like you feel like you already know a lot of these people through their channel. And yeah, last year, man, it was great to just meet everybody in person. And I can honestly say that every single person that I met was pretty much like I envisioned them from their channel. So you get a lot of real authenticity from the people in this community. So last year was great, and like you, I'm pretty bummed that we're not going to be able to do that at the end of this month, and possibly not even in December. But we shall see. Things have been changing a lot lately, and it's hard to really predict anything at this point.
Yeah, it's just crazy because it would be interesting to know what it would be like this year. Like how many more people would, meet up at a get together. Obviously, the hobby has just continued to explode to the point where at one point I think it was a supply issue at retail stores because I mean vendors just weren't going out and refilling the shelves as often as they typically would. But right now it's just you know clear the shelves kind of scenario going on. I was at a Target and a Walmart earlier this morning, and literally one had a couple boxes of XFL cards, and the other one had a couple clearance packs of Top Stickers 2018, and that was it. And they had been restocked at least in the last couple weeks. It's just they just slowly everything disappeared. So I mean, things are crazy. Obviously, the prices for rookies and parallels and all this stuff is just going bonkers. So it would have been kind of fascinating to see what an in-person show would have been, and you miss those. I know the Philly show is supposed to be in September and December. It's like I have no expectations of them actually happening, but I certainly hope they do because that opportunity to get out and look at cards and interact with people is just so special.
Yeah, it's a bummer because I honestly believe that if the national were to happen at the end of this month like it was originally planned, I think it was going to be the biggest national that we've ever had due to the hype, the excitement, so many new people getting in, so many people that were in when they were kids or young adults coming back in. I think it was going to be something just, I mean, crazy.
It would have been a spectacular event that we'll just have to imagine. We'll have to it'd be nice to set up some sort of marathon live stream or something one of those days and just kind of interact with people. That would be pretty awesome. Maybe that's something that one of our channels or one of the channels out there in the community can hopefully do with people who are interactive and involved in the community, not just someone selling stuff off on the side. But we'll see what happens. Before we get too far into this, though, Andy, just wanted to kind of hear your story a little bit about how you got started on your Russell Westbrook collection. You're a big basketball guy, big fan of OKC. How did that all come about?
It's kind of an interesting story, Mike. So on the 4th of July in 2016, I woke up that morning knowing that Kevin Durant was going to make his decision on whether or not he was going to stay in Oklahoma City. So I get up, turn on ESPN, and it comes out that he's leaving us to go to the Golden State Warriors. So I don't know if are you familiar with the show Curb Your Enthusiasm?
Absolutely.
So in Curb Your Enthusiasm, Larry David he starts a coffee shop next to Mocha Joe, and he's doing it out of spite. And looking back at how my Westbrook collection kind of started, it was almost out of spite, honestly. Like Kevin Durant had just left us. He was kind of like, he was the big guy in Oklahoma City. Russell Westbrook was kind of viewed as his sidekick, and all of a sudden, Robin becomes Batman. And so, like a month after that happened, after Durant decided to leave, that was when I made my first big Westbrook purchase, which was a 2008 Topps Chrome Refractor rookie. And that's kind of what got it all started. So I can kind of say that maybe I'm kind of like the Larry David of the basketball card collecting community,
Despite PC.
despite PC. And I'd always been a huge Russell Westbrook fan, but I'd never really collected a lot of his stuff. I think when Oklahoma City first when the Thunder first came to Oklahoma City, I think at that time I was probably collecting a lot more vintage baseball and stuff like that. So I didn't really get into collecting the Thunder players until later on. Like I'd had a few Kevin Durant rookies and stuff like that, which I immediately sold. I had like a lot of Kevin Durant T-shirts that I immediately got rid of, never wore again. So it was kind of like, yeah, it was a spite collection in the beginning.
It's funny. It's just weird the way kind of when you're collecting how you get involved or interested in different projects. It's just like one day you just make a decision and you're like, maybe I'll buy a card or two. And then next thing you know, kind of go full force into different things, whether it's making a set or collecting a player, whatever it may be. But that's what makes the hobby fun and interesting because there's always a different reason behind it and kind of different motivations. And the good thing about a strong, healthy market is if you change your mind or you want to reshift focuses, usually you have a market to be able to move some of your collection, whether it be via trade or sale, and then kind of reinvest those funds in being able to buy something else that you want for the collection. So that's always, really good when you have a crazy market like we have right now in the sports card hobby.
Yeah, and my Westbrook collection, like it started off with just that first card, and so I kind of started off really slowly with it. And over the past couple of years, I've kind of amped it up a little bit, which might seem odd since he really he doesn't even play for us anymore. So, but to me, he's always going to be my favorite Thunder player of all time, and I think the fans here really appreciate what he did for this city after Kevin Durant left because, he very easily could have demanded a trade at that time, but the kind of player that Westbrook is, he likes a challenge and he took the challenge on. And I think the people here, myself included, are always going to be grateful for that. And so I continue to collect him. He's still my favorite player, even though he plays for the Rockets now. I cheer for the Rockets whenever they're not playing us. We kind of joke around because they have Russell Westbrook and James Harden, so we just kind of call them OKC South.
What your area there like besides the Thunder, is there any specific teams people kind of collect? Like, what's considered local? Is it local favorites, or is it just kind of a mix when it comes to other sports?
Um, well, obviously the Thunder for basketball. I think NFL wise, like we have some people that like the Dallas Cowboys. They're relatively close. Um, Baseball, a lot of people seem to gravitate towards the Texas Rangers. So, with Thunder being the only pro sports team in town, I mean, they really, have a pretty crazy fan base here. So it's been really neat having a pro sports team here because, before 2008, we just didn't have any professional sports here.
Yeah, it's kind of obviously everyone can get lost in their own situation, but growing up in and around the Philadelphia area, obviously, it's a city that has always had the four major sports covered, and then there's just so many other bigger cities that are fairly close. So, I mean, within like a 6 hour drive in every direction, there's so many, there's like, dozens of professional sports teams. Sometimes you kind of think about certain areas of the country. And it's like, man, what is it like to be in a one sport city or something like that? And that's what I guess in a way, like with the hobby, it's hard for me to believe, not believe, but like think about sometimes like the competition to chase retail products has always been pretty fierce in the local area I am. And there's just always been a strong interest in sports. Northeast, very passionate sports fans, and the collecting market's been really strong for a long time. Obviously, going back generations to the vintage stuff that occasionally you can still find at maybe a garage sale or an auction where people are unloading stuff. They just kind of find it in a closet, and it's like you head out to Oklahoma City, and I mean, obviously the card market is fairly strong there, based on what I've heard from other people having a tough time finding products on the shelves and stuff. But do you kind of find like that it's a pretty strong, passionate collector base, generally speaking?
Yes, and as far as like the retail products that you're talking about, like it's virtually impossible to find anything retail here locally. I can like the last time that I found any retail product that I felt was worth purchasing was back in early January, and that was Prism basketball. Since then, like there's been several different basketball releases, and I have not seen a single pack of any of those here. And we do have, it's interesting because even as a one pro sport town, we have three card shops, and one of them, is a pretty big one and a really good one. Mikey Mantle Sports Cards.
I've seen
I
him
mean, I'm
show
sure
up on a
you've
lot of videos over on
yeah,
YouTube. A few different channels that
he's
we've mentioned. So always looks
he's a
like it's
great
just to be a
guy.
great time to check out that shop.
Yeah, he's a great guy, and their shop is just, top of the line shop. I mean, like they have vintage, modern, they have all sports. I mean, and he has, just an incredible collection, and he's just such a generous and fun guy. Like, you can go in there sometimes, and he'll just be like, "Here, open this." I mean, he's just a really fun guy. Like he has a lot of fun with it.
I'm
So
pretty sure it
it's
was one of your videos where you went there, and I think you were showing off like one of those big fat head things or something of JT Real Muto, because I guess he's
yeah,
from Oklahoma City. So
yeah.
that was pretty fun to see as a Phillies fan. Getting to enjoy watching JT play last year. He had a fantastic season. Hopefully, get to see him this year. We'll see how things pan out. Obviously, they're scheduled to play, but we'll see. But Real Muto is one of those guys. Doesn't get a lot of hobby attention. He's a catcher in baseball. They typically don't. And he was buried in Miami for a few years, but a fantastic player for sure.
Oh yeah, I think you could make a strong case that he's probably the best catcher in baseball right now.
Oh yeah, he's really good at calling the games and obviously defensively throwing out runners. And again, that doesn't necessarily equal hobby attention. It's kind of all about what you do with the stick. But JT Realmuto, he's someone might be worth buying if you can find a decent price on a card. I picked up a few of his rookies early in the off season, before things went crazy. Thankfully.
He was JT Realmuto was actually he was a very good high school quarterback here in Oklahoma as well.
Well, I think he did okay choosing baseball.
I think he made the right
He
choice.
is he's only at this point a couple months now away from free agency, so we'll see how he does. Because obviously we have an uncertain, uh, I guess, future when it comes to baseball, and in terms of when they're going to be able to have fans. Obviously, these owners have plenty of money, generally speaking, but we'll see with long-term contracts how what kind of effect that has. But getting back to cards, I want to get your thoughts a little bit about. I mean, I guess this crazy market. The market's been nuts. I've already mentioned that. I think anyone involved in collecting right now knows that prices are just through the roof. Football, I know Prism football has gone up a lot. I was like browsing eBay the other day. I don't even know how I saw it. I saw like a Nick Chubb Prism PSA 10. It was like $78 or something. I was like, oh, I bought like a pack or two of Prism last year and I got one. I sent it in, got it graded just kind of for the hell of it because I was like, oh, he's a good player. Got a 10. And I was like, it doesn't really fit the collection. I think I sold it for like $20 at some point because that's about what it was going for. I was like, why is that card $78 already? I don't even know if the auction was over. So, like, football's up, baseball's up despite them not playing. But basketball is a whole nother level. Obviously, you're a lot more familiar with basketball than me, but I know the international
Basketball is
market plays a
crazy.
role. I know the fact that these guys are a little more individualistic in terms of recognition because they're smaller teams, kind of bigger stars. But I mean, are those two key factors of basketball? Is kind of the star power and the international kind of money coming in? Like, in your opinion, why is basketball just so crazy through the roof? Where some of these rookie cards, Gem Mint 10, modern players from the last year or two are like over $1,000. It's kind of mind numbingly crazy.
Well, you hit on a few of the points there. Obviously, the international market plays a huge role. There's a lot of big time basketball card collectors that live overseas, and they have deep pockets, and they're not afraid to put their money to work. So that plays a big factor. The star power, like you talked about, I think one of the things, like in football, I've heard a lot of people say this, like in football, a lot of times you don't see the players' faces as much, so they're not as recognizable. And then baseball, I've just always kind of felt, and you'll have to give me your thoughts on this as well, but I've always felt baseball just doesn't do a very good job of marketing their players. I mean, with Mike Trout being as good of a player as he is, you could go into just a random room and ask everybody in the room if they know who Mike Trout is, and there's going to be a lot more people say no than what there probably should be.
I think baseball does a piss poor job, to be honest with you. And I don't know when that started or why that started. I don't know if it's like obviously there's a history of tension between owners and players associate, the players association and the owners. We saw that, just in the last month or so. And we're gonna see that again probably in a year or two. Like I don't know if it has something to do with that. Like it doesn't make sense. Cause I remember growing up and seeing Tony Gwynn and Ozzie Smith and these players, these stars of the early 90s, late 80s, early 90s on TV commercials. Like I remember watching the real Ghostbusters cartoon and I remember seeing advertisements for either Topps baseball cards or commercials for starting lineups or even commercials for whatever like potato chips or candy or something whatever it was, maybe Big League Chew, and you would see these players in commercials, and that really doesn't seem to happen much anymore. Sure, you get Mike Trout in the occasional commercial that's running prime time, not when kids are watching. um, I just you would think Major League Baseball would find a way to take advantage of the free advertising almost out there. They would encourage players, and obviously you don't want guys going out there causing controversy, but you would think you would do something with social media, whether it's free video clips or tweeting out clips or having players like being more involved with fans. I don't know exactly what the answer is, but they certainly have not done a good job, and they're getting kind of left in the left behind big time by basketball, and it's pretty incredible.
Well, like you said, like when we were kids, baseball was cool, right? And baseball was king at that time. And with this new generation, I think a lot of it has to do with the time that it takes to play a game of baseball versus the time it takes to play a game of basketball. It seems like, in this era of multitasking and everything is so fast paced, a lot of kids that I've talked to, they seem to think that baseball is boring. Where those of us that grew up watching baseball and still enjoy watching it, we're into all the little details and things like that. Where these kids are just like they're wanting action, all the time, action, action. So I think you can probably play two NBA games in about the same time that it takes to play one Major League Baseball game. So I think that's a factor. And then the social media stuff, like there's, more and more kids these days are interested in sneakers and stuff like that. And that's where the NBA does a great job. And that kind of all started with Michael Jordan. And that's just really amped up even more so as the years have gone on. So I think those things play a major role in it. I think some of the new young baseball players, and I know some people get upset with guys like Acuna and Soto because they think they're a little bit too flashy, but I think that's a lot of the kids. They're into that kind of swag, and I think that's something that may actually help baseball.
Yeah, I know last year what they have let the kids play or something was kind of their advertisement that they were trying to push there during the postseason. And I do think
Yeah,
that's important, whether you love it or not. You don't want guys showing. You don't want guys being completely disrespectful to a pitcher or something like point, whatever. There's a fine line there, but I think celebration, of course, I don't think's an issue at all, and I think that brings excitement. I mean, I just think with like social media, they should baseball's so tight with this stuff. Like still with MLB TV, you don't get your local team. They just make it so difficult to watch a game too. There should be more afternoon games or earlier starts. It should be more accessible. Sure, I mean, I guess it's great when the cable network ponies up hundreds of millions of dollars per year, but less and less people are watching it because less and less people have cable. Less and less young people specifically have cable. So I think it's pretty important to have more nationally televised games at reasonable time periods, and I really think they got to start making highlights and condensed games and stuff like that kind of more available. Especially they should have something for kids who like to like create stuff, like video stuff. They got to do something with like making it accessible to use those images and video clips. Like have some kind of app available where kids can like remix clips or something, make kind of like music videos or something of their favorite players, like highlight reels or something. I think things like that are important. And I think baseball sometimes gets too worried about trying to maximize their profits for today rather than thinking about, well, what's best for, tomorrow? What can we do to make money today, but also build it long term? So that is definitely an issue with baseball. So I mean, basketball is obviously not having much of an issue with that because, they have some of the biggest stars of the four major sports as of now, as we kind of generally define them.
yeah, I think baseball they've had that issue for a while now where they they constantly shoot themselves in the foot with things like you're talking about. Just they're way too looking way too short term, and they're not looking at the big picture a lot of times.
Yeah, there's too many guys. You have someone like Mike Trout is too good to not be kind of a pop culture kind of icon type of player. And there's too many guys that are incredibly talented, like Juan Soto, Ronald Acuna, guys like Francisco Lindor that have great personalities. Like these guys should be superstars. They should be plastered all over the place, featured in commercials, be on advertisements. They really they do have to get their kind of stuff together sooner rather than later with promoting their players and their sport. Obviously, football, generally, you have some of these guys that show up on the cover of Madden and they just become, big stars that, kids get interested in. Obviously, football has a really unique setup where it's that once per week during the course of those 4 months or so, and then the postseason. So football is kind of a really easy setup in a way to get people to pay attention. But baseball with the longer form, they're gonna have to do more work. And basketball's a fairly long season as well, 81 games, but they just do a much better chance, or a better job, I should say, promoting these players and. They kind of focus on what's popular today, and it works out for them. And we're seeing that kind of take over in the card market a little bit.
Oh, it definitely plays a factor.
All right. So the market is obviously nutty. It's bizarre. Prices are out of control. Like, what are your thoughts on where we are in terms of the current pricing of sports cards and rookie cards and all this stuff? Like, do you think it's peaked? Are we at a peak right now? Do you think it's still going to continue to rise, or is it just as unpredictable as everything else in the world? Because every time I think it can't go any higher, I'll take a couple weeks off, then I go on eBay and kind of check those recent sales of certain cards or products, and I'm just like, huh, went up again.
Well, first off, the way prices are right now, it's great for the cards that you already have in your collection, and it's not so good for the cards that you're looking to add to your collection.
Especially when it's a card that you're like, oh yeah, I was gonna buy that like 2 months ago, and then I got sidetracked and I forgot, and I just didn't pull the trigger yet, and man, maybe it's too late.
Absolutely. And as far as like where do things go from here? I mean, obviously none of us have the answer to that, but I would say that we're still kind of like early on in this process because there's just so many new people that are in this hobby, and I think they are just kind of learning and just getting started. And a lot of the people that are coming in, they are spending a lot of money. And I I don't see the momentum slowing down anytime soon. I mean, obviously things can't go up forever, but I still think that the key cards of the key players are going to continue to rise because I mean, right now, even on things that have, a pretty good amount of supply out there, the demand is just like nothing I've ever seen. So I do think that these prices, like for the big superstar guys in each sport, are going to continue to go up, at least in the short term.
Yeah, it's just crazy to think all the kind of wackiness of the world, and it's just completely paralleled for us in the hobby that we've been part of for a long time, and it just some of the stuff is just unbelievable. It's amazing because in one sense, which you just kind of stated, there might be a card you're interested in and you're looking at it and like, do I really want to spend this much on it when I know it was available at this price for such a lengthy period of time? But on in that part, you're kind of frustrated. But then when you just kind of take a moment and you look at what you do have and you flip through and you're like, oh, wow, oh, yikes, this was $50 card and suddenly it's 500. Like it's kind of
It's
bizarro
yeah,
land, but I don't know. That's the way
it
2020's been in general. Bizarro.
it's difficult, like you said, it's difficult to look at a card that was, like when you were looking at it initially and you were thinking about picking it up, it was, let's say, $50. And now you go back and look at it and it's, four or $500. It does like that. You still have that $50 price tag in your head of the price that it was, and that's just not where we're at anymore. So that's where you have to make the decision like, how badly do I want this card? And if it's like if it's a key card of a Mike Trout, a Patrick Mahomes, a Ronald Acuna, LeBron James, one of those elite players, like My feeling is you better get it now if you really really want it, because I just don't see this train slowing down anytime soon.
Yeah, I think you do. With the rise in prices, I think that means you have to be, especially when it comes to higher price cards, you have to be a little more selective and kind of think about it. And if it is a superstar, if it's an all time great, then probably now's the time to pick it up, despite the fact that the price may have doubled in the last 6 months. Because you might fast forward 6 months and go, oh, I wish I picked it up 6 months ago. But you
Yeah,
do want to
and
be careful with the hype, like the kind of the random hype that doesn't necessarily make sense. There are certain players out there that seem to get hyped up and the prices start doubling and tripling, and you're like, wait, why is this happening? Is this guy really that big of a name? Are they in line for that big of a career? Are there that many collectors? So that's something you do want to be careful with because, inevitably there's going to be some market volatility, especially once, teams start playing, guys start performing. There's going to be some guys who will be negatively affected by getting back on the field for sure. Someone like Mike Trout, probably not so much because even if they play a full 60 game season, he is not playing 60 games. He may, I mean, his wife's due in early August, so he's going to certainly miss some time. How much, who knows? But he's already been established as a future Hall of Famer.
that's a great point that you bring up there, is what happens when these guys start playing games again, because the fascinating thing about this time period that we're experiencing right now, where there has been no sports of any kind, is no one is struggling right now. No one's getting off to a slow start. No one's having a bad season. So it will be very interesting to see, like, if a Juan Soto or Ronald Acuna, if they get off to like a slow start or something, how will people react to their cards? Will people, just kind of like bail, or will they look at it long term, because these guys are super young. So that is going to be the key, is to see how, especially the new big money that's coming in, how are they going to react when one of these guys gets off to a slow start?
Yeah, especially with the flipper culture that's kind of developing very rapidly in sports cards. How many guys are going to try and dump right off if they don't understand? Because Acuna and Soto are set up for long term success. They're both incredibly young. I mean, Acuna's numbers last year were incredible. Soto on a World Series winning team. But then you have, the next level of rookies, the guys last year, like a Fernando Tatis Jr., Guerrero Jr., guys that still have even more to prove. I mean, if you really look at it, like Tatis is incredibly talented, could be amazing, has all the tools to be an all time great, but his numbers aren't probably as good on paper as his card prices would make you think. And he missed the last month or two of the season with an injury, so it's like a guy like him, if he gets off to a really slow start, or only plays a handful of games and gets hurt, I mean, that's the type of kind of player I would be a little bit concerned about for sure. Guys like
Yeah,
that.
and
Not that Acuna and Soto are super proven because they've both only been around for the last few years, but they've kind of cemented themselves in a way to show what they can do. The guys who haven't done that, I'd be super concerned about.
I think, people that have been in this hobby for a long time, collectors like yourself, myself, a lot of the people that we know in this community, like, I don't worry as much about people like that jumping ship on these players, because I think a lot of us, that have been doing this for a long time, we're in this long term. Regardless, we've been doing this for many many years, and we're going to do it for many more years. But yeah, like, it's going to be interesting to see, like, how some of the new people react, because it's just inevitable that not every player is going to go out and just have like a career year and light the world on fire. There's going to be guys that struggle for, a month or two, or maybe even the whole season. And that's the kind of stuff that I'm interested to see, how some of these newer people react to that.
Yeah, it could be fascinating. It's going to be a fascinating baseball season. I mean, obviously, hockey and basketball, they had the bulk of their season. So when they come back, it's going to be more about the postseason. But baseball, like, this is the full season, 60 games. I mean, in the regular season, if you lose 7 games in a row, it's rough. It's a bad stretch. But in a 60 game season, that's like losing 20 in a row. It's going to be really interesting because, if you struggle for 2 or 3 weeks, I mean, that's going to really negatively affect your numbers. I would hope most people understand this is an abnormal year, of course. So I'd be careful overreacting to a guy who kind of lights the world on fire. And, I would try not to panic too much about a guy who struggles for half the year, but we kind of know the way people are, in today's world where it's kind of can be, what have you done for me lately? So,
It's inevitable that you're going to have some people that just come out of nowhere and they just, start off super hot the first couple of weeks of the season, which normally wouldn't be that big of a deal. But this year, you come out and kill it for like 2 weeks, you're like an MVP candidate, you know,
it is
because the
crazy.
season is so short.
It's going to be weird, but I'm looking forward to it. Obviously, I'm hoping everything works out and it happens. It's going to be a bizarre year. There's probably going to be players who get sick and end up not playing that we think are going to play. So, I mean, those are all kind of weird factors. But I think you just have to toss this year out of the window and just kind of take whatever you get as just kind of like a bonus. We could easily just get nothing at all. So, I mean, we'll see how it kind of affects guys' long term careers and career numbers. I mean, I was really worried about that at first at one point, like, oh man, these guys are all going to miss a year. And then you kind of think back to all the greats of the past and how many guys missed 2, 3, 4 years due to, participating in the war. So I don't know that that's the biggest excuse. It certainly will hurt some guys, and some of the older guys are going to miss milestones due to it. But I think we're kind of heading and already to a degree at a point where people are looking more at quality of play rather than the compilation of numbers. We've seen that with pitchers in baseball in the Hall of Fame, not putting as much kind of stress on total wins compiled. We see it with awards like Cy Young Award. So I think you're going to look at the quality of the season, the quality of the player a little more than you are like just the raw numbers that they compiled during the year, anyways.
Oh yeah, definitely. I think the way that people view statistics has really evolved. And I think that, when people look at these players, 15, 20 years from now, I think this season is going to be, you know, looked at totally differently than, a regular season would be.
See what happens, but there's certainly plenty of products to choose from when it comes to the hobby because once the kind of printers got going for tops, they I don't think they've shut them off since. So got a lot to look forward to, especially with Chrome. We've got Tops Chrome coming out in another month or so, and then we've got Tops Chrome Sapphire, which will inevitably be dropping at some point. We've got Tops Chrome Black coming out at some point, and Tops Allen and Ginter Chrome coming out this year. And I think I saw Ben Baller, one of the artists involved in Project 2020, announced that he's going to be doing an exclusive Tops Chrome set. So there's going to be a lot of Chrome cards coming out. So many products to choose from. But one of the things that I guess it's been valuable for a while, but I feel like a whole new light's been shed on it lately, or at least a lot of focus. But sealed wax is something that is hard to keep sealed sometimes because there's always that temptation to rip it, and most people can't contain themselves. But I know you've kind of collected some sealed wax in the past. What are your thoughts on some of the rising prices in sealed wax? And some of it, obviously vintage wax, truly vintage from 7 years ago. It's incredibly rare, but even stuff from the 80s, junk wax baseball has actually risen in price. But early 2000s, mid 90s, all that stuff's incredibly hard to find. But even the prices of stuff from 2 and 3 years ago has kind of taken off.
It's been really interesting because a lot of the stuff, like you mentioned, the junk wax era, a lot of that stuff that, those of us that have been in this hobby for a long time, we've joked for years and years and years that that stuff would never be valuable. And then all of a sudden some of it is, it's just incredible with that stuff. And then you look at some of the harder to find wax, and with the way that the breaker culture is today, where people are doing group breaks and stuff like that, so much of the new product gets broken at release. So it gives you a good opportunity if you can get a hold of some of this wax, some of the desirable products at a reasonable price when it comes out, and just hold it for a few years, just kind of see what happens. Let it, I like to say, let it marinate a little bit. And I've collected some sealed wax over the years, and it's almost always goes up in value, especially if you're picking the popular products. I mean, because over the course of 2 or 3 years, it's very likely that somebody from that product is going to break out at some point, and some of that wax that we've kind of discounted from a couple of years ago all of a sudden becomes really super popular. And I like to buy wax, hold on to it, kind of see what happens with it. If it gets up to a price where I feel like it's time to get out, I'll go ahead and sell that. And then I put that money towards, some cards for my collection that I probably wouldn't be able to buy otherwise.
Yeah, and it's crazy how like products change and develop. Like 2018, I remember 2018 Tops Update, seeing the blasters on the shelves a ton, and I think I bought one or two and broke them on camera just to do a box break on the channel when they came out. And for whatever reason, I just did not break much. 2018 Tops Update is one of the few products even that year that I just didn't break a lot. And now I think back and I'm like, those blasters are like $100 a piece, and I probably could have bought like 100 of them for $20 a piece, and really didn't do it. Didn't buy and hold any of those. So it's amazing how things kind of change and evolve. Um,
And
but
that's
with
the
that being
thing
said,
too.
I
It's
did
like,
pick up some of the Chrome update, and I still have a few of them, and that's taken off as well. But it's just, I don't know, it's weird. It's like things just change, and people, rookies break out even more so, and things become a little tougher to find. And next thing you know, everyone wants it, and those prices spike, and then even more people want it.
yeah, and our friend Eric has been saying this for years. The population report on these graded cards over time, those can only go up, right? But the unopened wax, as more and more of it gets opened, the more scarce it becomes. And sometimes I think that wax, it does reach a price point where it just doesn't make a lot of sense to open it anymore, because you're like, what am I looking to pull here? Like, you can, sometimes the price will get to a point where you can pull one of the best cards in the product, and you can get it graded by PSA, SGC, BGS, whoever. It can grade a Gem Mint 10, and you still may only break even on the box, because people are buying the unopened stuff to keep it sealed, because it's becoming more scarce over time, and the math just doesn't add up to open it at a certain point.
Yeah, I guess 2018 Tops Update, you're looking at hobby boxes that I think are like $500-$600 right now. They were about probably $45-$50 Black Friday of 2018.
Yeah.
Like right now, I mean, it's a product where you could do okay. I mean, you could get a Soto or two and a Kuna or two, and if you hit all Gem 10s, I guess you could break even on it. Of course, the Otani, I believe, has risen a lot. So there's a ton of rookies in there. So there's a lot of opportunities to get money back on just base cards, which you have an incredibly likely possibility of pulling. Though, those paper cards can be a little more difficult to get Gem Mints on than one would expect. I mean, the hit is most likely going to be a relic that's worth like $3. Like, that's incredibly likely. Now, of course, if you get a parallel gold, Mother's Day, something even lower of one of the key rookies, obviously you're going to do really well, but the likelihood of even getting one of them is not good. To get one of those parallels is tough. And then with a 350 card set to get the player you're looking for, it's difficult. So it is quite the gamble. I mean, I think it's a gamble to break wax, just paying its initial kind of suggested retail price. When you factor in those premiums, Hey, there's people who do it clearly, but it's tough. I mean, you got a website like vintagebreaks.com. They're obviously crushing it over there. I mean, they're filling breaks nonstop, and I would think that's it's a type of company that if you're holding wax, you probably enjoy seeing their success because they just seemingly just perpetually ripping open rare products, and like you said,
Yeah,
less
and
and less available.
it's just it basically comes down to like how much are you willing to gamble? Like on the example that you used with the Tops Update box, if you had held those boxes for a couple of years and you can sell those for 500 now. See, I would rather sell that, and if I really wanted the Stodos and Acuñas, I can go out and buy a couple of Gem Mint copies of those cards without taking any risk of opening the boxes, and maybe I get shut out entirely, or maybe I get some and they're not in very good condition. So it just, I don't know. I'm not, I guess, like over the years, like the old me probably would open those boxes, but I guess we all evolve as collectors over the years, and I'm just to the point now where I would rather buy the singles, I think, in that case,
It's
and not
clearly
take the
the
risk.
wiser move for sure to just buy the singles, get exactly what you want, and not risk kind of draining some extra money you don't have to. It's definitely the smartest move, but it definitely is fun to break wax as well, and can certainly be fun. Be entertainment. You got to kind of count that fun factor if you're breaking wax. But if you're
Oh
breaking
yeah,
wax at
and
$500-600 a box, that fun factor better spike up quite a bit because
right,
you're
and
definitely
yeah, and don't get me wrong, like there's still, no matter how long you've been in this hobby, there's nothing like pack pulling one of those big cards yourself and having it in your collection, because you have that moment and that memory that's going to go along with that card, and every time you look at it, it's going to take you back to that excitement when you pulled that card. So that's one thing that you can't replicate that. So I mean, I still enjoy opening packs occasionally. Most of the time, like when I open packs, it's going to be retail stuff that I find, at Target or Walmart, and that just has not happened for me this year. So that has, I think my opening has slowed down considerably, but it's just because of a lack of opportunity.
yeah. There's no doubt it's tough, but there's something special about pulling a big card and having it in your PC because just like you said, you have that moment, that extra meaning to that card, which is awesome. It's definitely amazing to have. So, I mean, I encourage whenever people like message me or talk to me and they're like, well, what do you think? And I just always say, listen, it's got to be fun first. You got to collect what you like. Certainly, if you're putting time and energy into a hobby, you want there to be value for a number of reasons, right? You want there to be value so whoever you pass it on into the future has something worthwhile. You want it to have value so if something in life changes, you want to be able to move it and use those funds for something if you're kind of in a pinch. And I mean, everyone just wants something they have to have value. You don't, anyone could, collect dirty pennies and they'd be worth a penny a piece, but that maybe is just not as exciting as, collecting
I,
something that has some sort of value. But to me, you got to collect what you like, collect what you want, and assume and know that you will, like you said, evolve as a collector. You're going to change. Like you're going to get into rip and wax, and then you might get into grading, and then you might get a little more into rookie cards, and then you might be into the modern stuff now, but you might look back on the stuff from the 80s and 90s if you're of that age, and for the nostalgic purposes. Then you may get into the history of the various sports and find more interest in some of the rarer examples of vintage stuff. Like there's so many layers to collecting that you just have to realize you're going to change, and it's all about enjoyment. You got to enjoy it and you got to share it and have fun with it. But that doesn't mean that the financial aspect of it isn't important. It's definitely a key and important factor, but you just got to do a little bit of everything. And that's kind of the way I always look at it is listen, enjoy it all a little bit. Just of course find what you're most interested in, and then, focus can be a very important thing.
Absolutely. Like that's like for new people that are coming into the hobby, like I think a lot of them are coming into it because they hear about, oh man, this card sold for this much, and I got it out of a $2 pack or whatever, and so they're gravitating towards these channels that are talking about investing and stuff like that. The best advice that I could give a new collector is try to you have to try to decide what kind of collector do I want to be, and find some kind of focus, because there's so many products that come out all the time. It's so easy to get overwhelmed with everything. So you kind of have to, like, find what is going to be my purpose here. Like, am I going to be a player collector? Am I going to be, a box opener? Am I going to buy singles? You try to find out, and you can do like a little bit of each, but you kind of have to allocate, a certain amount of time and resources to each thing, and figure out where do you want your collection to go. Kind of look at a little bit big picture of it, because the worst thing that can happen, and I've had this happen many times throughout my collecting career, you might say, you look at your collection one day and you're like, I don't like, why do I have all of these different things? Like, I'm not really interested in this player or this set, but you kind of end up with a lot of stuff that you're really not passionate about. And it's very easy to do that in this hobby.
Oh yeah, it's definitely easy to be kind of influenced to just pick up cards because other people are picking them up. And it's one of those things that we kind of all go through and everyone will go through. And I've actually, as of lately, been kind of thinking, I'm like, you know what, I should probably go through and almost like audit the collection, like go through and kind of look at stuff and be like, hey, are some of these things I really want, or do I just kind of have it to have it? And a lot of the reasoning behind that is because lately, I mean, I collect a little bit of everything. When it comes to baseball, like I just love the entire history of the sport and the collectible. So I like to have a little bit from all the eras, and I know sometimes in the past you've seen on social media like the modern versus the vintage guys, and I'm someone who likes all of it. So I'm like, to me, how do you not kind of enjoy everything? The entire kind of history of the sport and the different cards are just great. But I've really, I'm going to do a little bit with Hall of Famers and, of course, all the modern guys. But I've really, I mean, I've always been a Phillies collector, but lately I've been trying to just continue to pick up like a one card from all the different sets produced. And at a certain point, you start to really pick up all the common ones. So start to get into the more expensive sets that are just truly incredibly rare and really even tough to have that opportunity to purchase. So I start thinking to myself, I'm like, geez, I got so much that it's like at some point something's got to give. Like you don't have an unlimited
Oh yeah.
budget at all. So sometimes, you have to go through and be like, you know what? Maybe I can move a few of these and then take that money and add something that kind of better does fit the collection, something that is more meaningful.
Yeah, very well said. And that's something that, regardless of how long we've been doing this, we all struggle with that. And it's very easy to, like you said, you see something that somebody else bought and you're like, man, I like that. So you get it, and then you have it for a while, and after a while you're like, yeah, I don't really need this. That was kind of like an impulse buy. We've all done that. And I I always like think to myself, if when I look at my collection, because I like to look at my collection pretty often and just kind of, look at the cards, enjoy the cards. And if I see something in there that I'm like, yeah, I really don't need that, I have no trouble moving that in order to get something, that I feel like fits my collection better.
Yeah, I think it's important to do too, just to kind of continue interest, to just kind of continue to improve the collection or upgrade the collection, however you want to phrase it. But I mean, your tastes are going to change, and I'd say in the past you could always just go, you know what? I could always rebuy the card if I want it. With today's market,
Yeah,
who knows? It could
absolutely.
double in price or triple in price by the time you decide to do that.
It very well could.
But it's just the way it is. With modern day players, of course, the price could always drop out from certain guys. As well. So it's just it's a pretty amazing hobby, and it's way more like sometimes I'll talk to someone and they'll be like baseball cards like they still it's becoming more popular, but you still have people who are like baseball cards like they still make them, or isn't that something for like little kids that they used to do in like the 80s? It's like no, that it's way more complicated of a hobby than that. Mine would go freaking melt if you had any clue how complicated the modern day card market is, and ever evolving and changing.
Yeah, and like all of us are going to have, different budgets as far as like how much money we're going to spend each month. And there's, regardless of how much that is, there's always going to be someone else out there that has a bigger collection than we do, or, a more valuable collection than we do. And that's just part of it. You just have to like, you can't really worry about what this guy over here is spending. You have to, stick within your budget. And I always kind of look at it, if I'm looking at a card that I want, sometimes it comes down, for some people that have like this huge budget, they can have this and that. But for me, sometimes it comes down to I'll be looking at one of the cards I have in my collection, and it may come down to I can have this or that. So I'm always constantly evaluating that. And regardless of the value of the card itself, like if I have something and I see something that I would rather have, then, I have no problem, moving this card to get that one if I want that one more. And that one would bring me more enjoyment to my collection.
How do you determine like which card? If you have an either or scenario, do you go with the one that's just like for me when I've been in that scenario? I'm like, oh, two things are at auction, and I really can only get one. I typically go with the one that I'm like, this one is going to be way more difficult to find. Again, it might take a year or two, so that's kind of where I'll
Oh,
kind of
yeah,
try and make my
absolutely.
decision. But it's still tough because it's like, damn, I really want both.
I mean, if you have two cards that are equal value and this card A only pops up once or twice a year, and card B, you can find one pretty much anytime you want to. Yeah, I go with the one that's only going to come up once or twice a year, just because I know I can pick the other one up later. Even if it goes up, even if the other one does go up in value, I know that it's still going to be available. Whereas this other one, it may not be available regardless of whether the price goes up, down, or stays the same.
Is another thing that just kind of popped in my head. And it's something that I've thought about, in the past a little bit. But, we look back now at some of that stuff from like the 90s, mid 90s, late 90s, even early 2000s, and the prices have gone kind of crazy. They're kind of tough. We get stuff that's serial numbered to 100, 200, but they really don't come up very often. Like, what do you have any idea like what things are going to be like in 10 or 20 years? Obviously, who knows what's going to be happening in the world by then, but obviously we're in a culture now where it seems like virtually everything's getting graded. PSA is completely overwhelmed. I still have at least one order that's out since December and a number that are out from early this year. SGC, they've obviously gained a lot of traction, and they can't handle it right now. They're running kind of a bit behind. They're not quite at PSA levels, but obviously don't have quite the volume, but they're behind. Beckett, I'm sure, is behind. We have new players maybe coming into the game, but with everyone getting stuff graded, like, do you think some of these serial numbered cards are gonna like is history gonna repeat itself where it actually becomes difficult to find because they either get locked away in collections? I mean, I'd assume less will be destroyed, but it's just kind of weird to think about because we've seen this a few times. Even the old Donruss Elites. I mean, they're not super valuable unless they're incredibly high grade, but they're numbered to 10, 20,000, and they don't come up as often as you would think. And now, with the resurgence of the late 90s stuff, that stuff doesn't come up all that often. Like, what's going to happen in the future with all these different color parallels numbered to 5 and 25? Like, are they just going to vanish into the
It's
collecting world?
it's interesting because you know, speaking like I can speak from the basketball card market because that's kind of, been my focus for the last couple of years. And you take a guy like a LeBron James, for instance, you know, some of his rare cards, you may not, even with the crazy prices right now, there's cards of his that are like, some of the ones that are numbered to 10 and stuff like that. There hasn't been a public sale of some of these cards for 3 or 4 years. So the people that, I mean, absolutely, on some of the more popular guys, the people that have them, they're definitely holding on to them because they know that, they could sell it, get the money now, but they know that that's probably a card that if they decide down the line that they want to get one again, there may not be one available for a long time.
Yeah, it's just like insane how things just kind of vanish. But you get into like a mindset. It's like, oh, everyone's on social media and they just aren't. And everyone's, breaking stuff and having to sell stuff. And that's not necessarily true either. There's plenty of people who are collecting and, you know, someone might pull a card numbered to 5 and they're just gonna have it in their collection. Like it's not never gonna be known with certain stuff. Like maybe like say the Juan Soto, I think he has a red refractor numbered to 5 from 2018 Chrome update. Like some kid could have gotten one for Christmas and not even known that much about it. It might be in some kid's drawer somewhere in this country. Like you have no idea like what ends up with some of these cards. Not every single one ends up on eBay. So
Oh, exactly, because those packs that you could pull that Soto out of, those were not always expensive. So yeah, those very easily could have ended up like in a kid's Christmas stocking or something like that, and he opened them, and they might be sitting in the closet somewhere or something. You just don't know, and then maybe 15 or 20 years down the road, maybe that's going to be like one of the big finds. Like you see those a lot now with some of the vintage stuff that has been sitting in somebody's closet or attic for 50, 60 years. We may see stuff like that happen in 20, 25 years for us, with some of this stuff right now.
it's like, hey, I just
It's
discovered this random card that says 1 of 1 on it of this guy.
right.
Is this guy any good? It's like, yeah, he's pretty good.
Yeah, he was pretty good back in his day.
It's like I said, there's so many different things, in this hobby to kind of think about. You can easily have like a 24-hour discussion on the hobby, but somehow, some way, we've already eclipsed an hour here with our discussion. So it's definitely been a good time. Anything else you wanted to touch on?
Oh man, not really. I mean, I once again, thanks for having me on, Mike. It's been a lot of fun just talking with you about the hobby. I mean, just a spoiler here, like for everyone out there, you and we talked for almost an hour before we even started this, and just had a great conversation, just talking about so many topics, and like you said, it's a never ending learning experience. This whole hobby is so. I really appreciate your channel. You provide a lot of great content, a lot of great knowledge. So I would encourage, anyone out there that's just getting into the hobby, or even if you've been in the hobby for a long time, check out MikeO. He's one of the legends here in the YouTube sports card community.
I'll also make sure at the same time you're checking out Andy. She blinded me with refractors. Check out his channel for tons of knowledge of basketball because you're not getting much of that from me, that's for sure. But no, you have a awesome channel as well, and it's a great community, and there's tons of great channels, and there's always new channels. So I always tell people, listen, if you're on YouTube, and this podcast is placed on SoundCloud and iTunes and YouTube, and obviously a lot of people listen to it on YouTube. But if you're listening to it on one of the other platforms, check out YouTube. There is tons of incredible information. I mean, there are hundreds and hundreds of channels, and just do some research. Just flip through, kind of keep searching and clicking from channel to channel. Click on people you see commenting on a lot of videos because there are a ton of people putting out videos that have an incredible amount of knowledge of this hobby, and there's so many levels to it, whether it's pre-war, whether it's the vintage, whether it's the modern, whether it's breaking stuff, grading stuff. And these are people who have been in this hobby for a very long time. It's not necessarily all the flashiest channels or all the channels that maybe YouTube tries to push on you with their algorithm, but there's a lot of great information out there. So I certainly encourage everyone to do their best to kind of support all those channels and do yourself a favor and kind of get a ton of knowledge from all these people who have been doing it for a long time.
Yeah, and I guess like the last thing that I would say, Mike, the last piece of advice that I could give for new people to the hobby is do not pay people for advice, because out of all the people that I know in this hobby, the people that have the most knowledge, they won't charge you for it.
Well said, for sure. Andy, I appreciate you joining me on this episode of Hobby Talk. It flew right by. Hope to get to do it again at some point in the future, and hopefully we get to meet up at another national, whether it be this December or perhaps Chicago 2021, maybe sometime beyond that. I think we still have a while before we know any of those answers, but either way, it's going to be an incredible experience for everyone to get together and share the hobby and share their knowledge together and share some moments of hanging out, having fun, looking at baseball cards, basketball cards, football cards, hockey cards, whatever you collect. It'll be awesome.
Looking forward to it, my friend.